Hello there, and welcome to the Camo Net Podcast. This is episode 8, just blowing through these episodes. I am your host, Bambi Sandy, with a group called Camo Net Supremacy. We cover Armory Forger and the competitive community for the game. Uh, aren't Russian face models just eerie? I I almost recycled this one and took a different picture, but something about it that just speaks to the soul. If you represent a team in the competitive community or believe that you would be a good candidate for an interview, you can join our Discord through the link in the description and reach out that way. Just keep in mind that it is not a proper link. YouTube is weird with account age. It doesn't let you actually have links in your descriptions until you reach a certain threshold. We should have 2 or 3 interviews coming out this week, right before July. Um, we're also currently looking for people that are comfortable with being anonymous sources for their teams, communities, and organizations. It's to support proper journalism for the scene. The aim there is to speak to events after the fact to drive depth and accountability interest for the scene. You can effectively tell the story of a particular team's prep for a season, once it's come and gone, and then also it gives people an opportunity to hold their leadership accountable, which is always a nice thing when it comes to these teams and communities and general organizations, where you can kind of get, hey, we won the tournament, but our team was a complete shit show, and they dropped a bunch of people from the roster and had people come in from other teams, just stuff like that. If you're a fan of the content and you want to subscribe, that's cool. We aren't aiming to appeal to a mass audience. We expect to annoy some people down the line. So we definitely won't be curbing our opinions or topic depth to avoid pushing potential subscribers away. It's something to say about if we only mentioned really easy to understand concepts, having kind of that be more approachable and easier to understand for ordinary people. But there are other people for that kind of content. We're planning to hold our first community debate in the game in a few weeks, or about the game in a few weeks. We'll select from 3 or 4 different topics per debate, and then 2 to 3 people to represent the pro side for those subjects, and then 2 to 3 people to represent the con or the counter positions. If that sounds like something you'd be interested in, please reach out through the Discord. And our content doesn't feature crazy overlays or editing on purpose. So, aside from technical issues and bits on the front and back end of the recordings, kind of leave everything in the middle for transparency. Gives things a little bit more of a genuine flow. Oftentimes, there isn't a co-host or a guest to feature in a podcast, but like that kind of style of everything that was genuinely said makes it in the recording. Obviously, if there's like a tech issue in the middle, we'll edit that out. But so, with each episode that goes by, you'll notice that we've been getting a little more granular with the competitive community for the game. The pace of the content has been increasing as we get closer to ARCL Season 2 starting, since that feels a little more natural than just recording an episode on, say, Monday and then waiting a week to publish the thing. It could stretch out the content, but why? So as we get closer, I kind of feel like it's natural to sate sort of the increasing excitement and anxiety that's probably building. Also, there's something to say about kind of getting everything established before the season starts, and then you can kind of silo different stages of like the content that comes out while ARCL is going is going to be objectively different from the conversation in episodes that come out beforehand and then after, obviously, as well. So just kind of rolling with that seems logical and natural. This episode, we're going to get into a myriad of topics that are all over the spectrum. trying to avoid talking about one subject for too long, uh, to reach a little bit of a wider audience per team. If I spend like 30 minutes talking about leadership specific stuff, it's probably going to be really easy to tune out if you aren't doing that stuff, if you're just kind of like a guy on a team. So, uh, big shotgun spread for this one. Nothing's particularly flashy or controversial with this episode, but it's good to talk about the boring stuff from time to time. Otherwise, if you just kind of assume that everyone's on the same page, then can't act surprised when it turns out that people aren't. So the first thing that we're going to start off with is what I think is sort of the more important subject to lead with: avoiding burnout. This is both with the game, within your team, with people in general. Um, and the first thing I'm going to kind of mention with this is, you know, within your own team, community, organization, Discord, whatever you want to call it, whatever your mode of, yeah, obviously, there's a lot of people that are in larger communities that host their own servers, and then out of that population, you have a competitive team, right? So take this however you want to, if the shoe fits wear it. Uh, you're not often going to get along with the majority of the people on your team between politics, real life politics, personality differences, opinions on like what your team's doing and how you're performing, what people need to work on, especially if you're not in a leadership role, um, strategy, power dynamics. That typically ends up being kind of a big friction point. Someone's in a leadership role just because they knew a guy, you know. Um, it's more common than not. If you find that it's getting hard to spend ordinary time outside of matches and scrimmages with your teammates, um, you just spend a portion of your time away from them. If you're on a team and they're uncomfortable with you like playing Reforger with your friends, for instance, if you've got like a real life friend that picked up the game, probably not a great relationship to maintain. Um, you know, ordinary matches like pubs, public matches with another team, even I would argue. If your sleep schedule is a little different, if you're on East Coast time and everyone else on your team is basically on West Coast time, and then in the US, go play some with some UK people from another team. Go play on their servers a little bit. Um, and then friends, even just other games. It's good to kind of mix it up. When you're playing a game where they really don't come out with new maps, pretty much every server is running the same sort of experience. It's really easy to burn out and just kind of like double down on nothing. Uh, so pretty important to kind of mix stuff up. Um, and then if there's drama, I had to figure this out the hard way through my time with Squad. Um, when I started playing that, not that this conversation's about me, but when I started playing Squad in the competitive scene, I had 2 hours in the game. I explicitly went over to Squad to do competitive. And for some reason, someone let me on their team with like 2, 3 hours in the game. And I was terrible, right? So I got to go through like almost a complete arc of like just being shit at the game. Like I couldn't recognize enemy uniforms, and I would often just like let people walk by me because I didn't want to accidentally team kill someone. They'd turn around and dumpster me, and so over time, I had to learn this the hard way, especially when you're kind of new to the scene. You've never done competitive before. You're around all these people that are probably really good at the game, and they've got kind of like aspirational qualities, at least performance wise. Um, if there's drama in your team or involving your team, just don't engage with it. Don't dig into it. Don't take a side. It's really easy to get caught up in the politics of like, one leader in your team versus another, or even like outright having a beef with another team. He said, she said, well, you were disrespectful in that voice call, sort of shit. Um, if you don't take a side or a stance in the thing, you'll set yourself up for really great success down the road. Um, because it often turns out that like the information that you had at the time wasn't what happened or what was really going on, or like people were really hot in the moment, but it was just a flash in the pan and it didn't even really mean anything. And I'm going to give like a specific example for this. This absolutely happened. So the first competitive team that I was ever on, I was in Korea at the time, so I either had the choice of playing squad with Chinese people who did not speak English or Australians, so I chose Australian people. So my first team was an Australian team, and when I came into the group, there was a really big kind of power struggle slash direction challenge that the team was going through between a couple of different kind of factions inside the group. Some people wanted to play a particular way with every match, and some people wanted to play a completely different way. I'm not going to get super deep into it because some of the mechanics of squad were, not really relevant for Reforger, but um, I didn't necessarily take a side in that because I had no standing. I wasn't even good at the game in any way, shape, or form. But I kind of bought into that. And out of that situation, the people that kind of disagreed with how things were being run then left for another Australian team. So time goes by. I leave Korea because at the time you were only stationed there for like a year. Leave Korea, go to the US, join a completely different team. I reconnect with a lot of those Australian people like a year and a half on. And all those guys are talking like nothing ever happened. But anytime that I would think about that situation or I would see those names in the community, like someone would make a post, one of those guys that had left would make a post in like the OWI, like the official game Discord or whatever. I held on to inherent animosity because I'm like, oh no, I never said anything openly about it, but like, oh no, that's that guy that, kind of fucked us over when we needed him to stay in XYZ. Um, and then every example that I'd seen either happening in another team or kind of distal in my own kind of communities and organizations from that point on, I saw that same kind of line play out over and over again. Um, so you can believe me or not, but you're gonna have a better time, and you're not gonna burn unnecessary bridges and kind of have weird, wonky conversations with people if you just don't buy into basically any of it. Um, and then for team and kind of community events, still sort of like the subject of people in communities, but you should treat your time with your team or your community kind of like a job. Not in regards to like you have to work, but you know, even if you're happy with where you're at, you should have a backup in mind because anything can happen at any point. If you feel, namely, if you feel like you aren't improving as a player, if you really enjoy the game, you're really digging into like your role or whatever they have you doing, but you kind of feel like you're stagnating, or if you don't feel like you're being valued, right? If you make multiple um, attempts at like talking to your leadership and you say like, hey, I'm kind of burning out on like the gunplay aspect of the game. I would love to step into like a leadership role if that's an opportunity, or if I could shadow someone or something like that. And just no one gives a fuck about like you or that communication. Or if people are just consistently, this is more like a North American team kind of a comment, but if everyone's inherently like pitted against each other in the group and like there's no opportunity. This typically happens in like PvE milsim groups, funny enough, where there's no opportunity to get into certain leadership roles because then that's inherently a challenge to like someone else's leadership role. People don't want to step out of a job because they typically like built themselves into that job. Um, so if you kind of feel like that's happening, have that have that backup idea. Talk to some teams. Don't necessarily court other teams, but try to make some friends from, another North American team that, you know, every now and then you ask, like, hey, how's it going over there? Oh, we're doing great. We're actually having a scrimmage, every weekend until the tournament so far. And you're like, man, my team isn't doing fucking half of that. That actually sounds pretty good. You can then kind of make an informed decision from that on. Typically, what happens is people don't maintain sort of a second choice, and then the group kind of explodes or fractures, and you're kind of left just homeless in a way, in a manner of speaking. Uh, Even good things end just naturally sometimes. So like sometimes stuff just pops up. The best example, if you talk to anyone that's tried to set up numbers for like a scrimmage so far, the number one friction point when you're trying to manage a team or just a couple of guys, it's like getting people to just sign up for events. Um, Numbers are huge. So sometimes, if your team signed up for like a 20v20, but you can't get the numbers a day before the tournament or like the scrimmage, having that backup plan and relationships outside of your own team could be the difference in you participating or not, right? Other people are kind of left holding the bag, like, well, fuck, 12 of us really wanted to play in this and like kind of set aside time and stuff. And we don't have really anywhere to go. And you're already, you know, on someone else's roster or like set up as a merc, you know? Um, so just keep that stuff kind of in mind. And then, too, like, people jade with time. Um, Even on a good day, people have bad moments. People's family members die sometimes. People get in car crashes and like that fucks up their perspective for weeks on end. Um, and if that sort of stuff is happening to someone in a leadership moment, like even the best team where everyone's got great buy-in, everyone's really happy to be there and all that good jazz, um, yeah, that all just kind of falls to the wayside. Your greatest players too will often jade out quicker than anyone else, which can turn a fantastic team really into a mediocre one. Yet people that spend exponential time with the game um, are just going to run themselves ragged faster. Yeah, everyone's different, and everyone's got a different sort of threshold for that. But just a fact that like, yeah, if you spend more time, say with Everon, and you put 2,000 hours into playtime on the map in 6 months, 8 months, your relationship with that map and your like boredom when it comes to doing stuff from that point on is just going to be way further, way harsher than anyone else's. Um, so just kind of treat yourself right and sort of build yourself up with that stuff in mind. And then burnout with the game in general, kind of like I just touched on, like just always try new stuff. New maps if they come out, modded maps, take a look around. Um, New servers. There's a little bit of an issue there because most servers are running the same sort of like gunplay experience, but new groups to play with, right? If you're on the East Coast, kind of like I mentioned before, play with some UK people from time to time if that's an option or an opportunity. Play with some West Coast people. Um, if you play with your team on public matches, whoever's available on any given day, and people only ever want to do offense, you might find that playing with another group, they actually prefer defense and kind of like just chilling out and talking. That might be enough of a change for you to kind of stay fresh. Uh, and then the big thing's new roles. Public matches are your space, your judgment free space. They should be, anyways. For you to just suck at stuff, right? If you don't drive a logistics truck because your internet always fucking sucks, fuck it. Try driving one. Maybe you can find a way to drive where you don't rubber band all the time, or maybe it's a speed thing. Especially if you suck at driving kind of the larger trucks. Obviously, update 1.7 just came out and they kind of increased the viability of that at speed. But you know, um, I I never find opportunities organically to play as an AT guy with rocket launchers, hitting stuff at range, or with the GL kit in a meaningful way. Yeah, so if I kind of find myself burning out, I'll play with pistols, and just fuck around a little bit or try to hit just weird, odd shots with RPGs and stuff. Um, no one, people can kind of tell you about it, but it's one of those things that like you have to maintain yourself. You have to give kind of like introspective reminders of like, man, I'm kind of getting negative about the game. Like, I should do a little something. Uh, and then just not specific with this game, just gaming in general. Life should always take precedence over gaming. Job promotion opportunities, family, friends time, and like hobbies that you can kind of do with your hands, carpentry. I've known people that kind of like stepped away from the game a little bit to go like fly RC helicopters and thought that was cool. Um, None of that stuff, if you have an opportunity to do it, should take a back burner position. This thing, I'd argue it's good to see it as a hobby, but this is kind of a lesser hobby than what you could have options for. So and then too, like if you're gonna do sort of that stuff, just communicate with your team and don't be a dick about it. Just say like, hey, I'm kind of on the fence. I might need to take like a week long break or something like that, and then you go do that shit. Um, then next subject, completely different tone as well. We're just gonna touch on the stereotypical cycle of a competitive team, and I shouldn't have to say this, but this is in the context of like our level of competitive, right? No one's getting paid to do this stuff. This is just like human nature, incentive structures, and averaging out data across different games and how those scenes kind of play out. At the end of the day, competitive teams have less to do with the specific game that you're playing and way more to do with just how people act over the internet, Discord management, personality management, stuff like that. So, um, every group starts with a little bit of poaching, just a little bit of poaching. Um, so we're going to kind of describe this subtopic as the beginning stage. So typically, building a competitive team inherently involves poaching some people from another team or community, right? For the same reason that if you were going to go start your own Arma server, you would probably look around to find like a dev role guy to see if he wanted to embark on this journey with you, right? You probably wouldn't start your own server if you A, didn't know how to do it, didn't have experience with it, and B, if you didn't kind of have anyone to bring with you, even if it was just like one other person. Same thing with competitive teams. And the demographics are typically just that bad to get something going from scratch. So competitive players, if you really kind of think about it, already a niche subset of the player base. Competitive players that are worth including on a team project have to both have the drive to play the game consistently. You're not going to invite someone, if your kind of core idea is, we're going to start with like 5 guys and build up from there. You're not going to invite the guy that no shows for every event. Or someone that like just had a kid, for instance. Like that's probably not a consistent schedule to really rely upon. So you have to have people that have the drive to play the game. If they have the choice between hanging out with their buddies and smoking weed downstairs or playing the game, you want someone that actually wants to play the game. And you have to have time out of those people, or have to, out of that subset, people have to have time for the matches and practices. There's all sorts of people that would love to do, competitive or be on their own team or start their own team, start their own project, fucking start their own business in life. But they just don't have the time. So you kind of have to have that in mind. That's a really, really, really small percentage. And you're really not going to find those people through casual play of the game where you're going to walk up to every single person and go like, hey man, do you know what competitive is for this game? You want to join my group? Even if you do that, because I've been there before. Oftentimes, people will join the Discord, they'll see what it actually is, and they'll leave. Um, and kind of when you're doing that, uh, it can feel so. This is a positive sort of to the what's been a negative so far with the process. It can really feel like you're doing something wrong or unpopular, especially if you leave a team to do things better in your eyes and nobody joins. Um, that's normal though, and it's something that I was really kind of seeing more often by the time I was leaving squad was you can mitigate that feeling at the very least. It won't change the reality, but um, by doing a coalition with another team, right? And maybe the agreement that you have with that team is like, hey, I'm not going to poach any of your guys, but I just want to participate. And while I'm kind of waiting on numbers to build up and make my own team, I want to still be part of the process and play in matches and scrimmages and build my knowledge and foundation and stuff. And a lot of times you'll find that that team is like, all right, cool. And they'll let you run your own squad of like a couple of guys because like that doesn't really cost anything. That's fine. Um, then you've got kind of the middle stage. I call this replacing, mismanaging, and misvaluing, because that's typically what happens in this stage. So, and if please, I might say a bunch of shit right now, and then it just culturally never happens with any Reforger competitive teams or communities. I could be totally wrong with this. If I am, that would be incredible, and that would be a positive. Probably won't happen. With teams that are already running, or at the very least, if you're able to field enough people to participate in events or scrimmages, right? If you can sign up for 10v10s, you've got a functioning team. Um, it's really easy to mismanage what you have on your roster while simultaneously trying to look for skill and specialty players. Um, building up a training program, doing, my preference is YouTube videos. I'll record myself doing something with a little bit of voiceover, like me explaining what I'm doing and why I'm doing it in the video. And then you've got kind of like a viable over time product. You don't have to have people hop in game to recreate what you're trying to explain for them to do. But uh, you'll, instead of kind of going through the hard work, you'll be like, all right, well, I've got 10 people in the bag. They consistently sign up for events. All right, cool, cool. I see that guy over there on the server we play on all the time. He's able to hit like these crazy anti-tank shots, or like that helicopter pilot that does flashy landings and stuff. And you'll spend more time kind of focusing on those people and those roles than you will on your own people that you already have on your roster. Um, the reality is that teams should be running their own internal scrimmages, and I'd argue even like academy sort of events, to evaluate where people can improve and train up. If you've got 10 people, that's 5v5s. That you could run that any weekend. Don't have to have another team sign up and say yes. You can do 4v4s if you don't have enough people. Um, and then at least you're doing something. And the opportunity there, or what you're looking for there, isn't necessarily, you know, who's better out of your guys. It's really, you're just looking for the low points. You're looking for like, hey, Joe consistently is dropping the fucking ball. He's never looking in the right direction. I can tell he's never looking at the map to see like the objective behind him's getting taken. Stuff like that. Um, it there's something about it. I don't really know where it comes from. Maybe the reality is that just everything is downstream of sort of like sports culture and politics. everyone wants to treat competitive games, even at our level, which is low, um, like professional or baseball or football versus like junior league kind of attitudes. Um, Everyone wants to trade and look for opportunities to get finished products, guys that you don't really have to like put anything into. And that's rarely what's going on. You should be spending most of your effort and energy with training up what you already have. Because the likelihood that someone's going to appreciate that training and that trust in you, it might result in you losing some scrimmages that you wouldn't otherwise. Um, those people are going to stick around through thick and thin, and you're going to have a way more durable team. Um, it's really important too to diversify your training when you hold it. Your roster isn't going to improve at the same pace, and your roster probably as it sits right now, uh, nowhere near each other skill wise. Some people are fantastic shooters, some people are garbage, some people have zero map knowledge, some people have a ton of map knowledge, some people are great at driving in the game, some people avoid it like the plague. Some people would make great helicopter pilots, and some people you wonder how they loaded into the game. Um, so you need to be able to address all those disparities, and then the pace of learning is going to be different for everyone. Um, you got to find a way to keep high level talent or people engaged and involved without completely ignoring, kind of shirking the lower level guys. And it's kind of sometimes a rough line to walk, especially because everyone lives lives and you got to schedule out time to do certain practices and scrimmages and stuff like that. It's almost like having to make a series of medical appointments where you can only make one medical appointment at a time. So like you call for your knee, for instance. If this is going to sound like a really weird specific example, it's because it's directly from like my VA process. You'll call and you'll schedule an appointment to get your knee seen or something like that. All right, well we got to schedule you like 2 weeks out. And then you get seen for that, and then you're like, all right, call back in. You're like, hey, they found X, Y, and Z, and they're like, okay, we'll schedule you for imaging 3 weeks out. Like it's fucking rough sometimes. Um, but it's worthwhile to kind of chase after that stuff. And then if there's an opportunity to rotate, this is an absolute banger, by the way, just giving away top tier, supposed top tier, um, people management and training pace info here. Dot dot dot. Uh, if you have an opportunity to rotate people through squads or leadership roles, uh, you're gonna find that that solves a ton of your friction problems. People disagreeing with each other, personality differences, people who think that like some people don't deserve to be in leadership roles and shit. Um, people that might have been critical of a squad lead or like a senior shot caller for your team might come away from a scrimmage stint in that role with renewed respect. One of the I left Korea and then I spent a majority of my time in competitive with squad with a singular team, um, and the best relationship that I'd ever developed uh, on that team with someone, and kind of like my step up into a leadership role from just being a Joe, was through an incentive structure and a system like that. Um, so you got to think about, if anyone's ever done like PvE milsim, think about what sort of the internal stresses are and annoyances are with that. It's going to be 10 times worse for a competitive match where like you've got some buy-in in wanting to win. What happens if you die in a PvE match? You just fucking respawn and like get flown back in. Yeah, it's different for a competitive match. So all of that tension is just going to be different and worse. So if you account for that kind of early, fantastic. Um, and then the last stage, typically for groups, is fracturing generalizing and then reforming. And I've only got 1 point for this. I've just got data through experiences. Don't really have anything flashy to say for this. Inevitably, all teams flame out or fracture or pare down sometimes. Um, Nobody's getting paid to do this. No one's getting paid to interact with the game to this degree. Especially when you start talking about like people spend hours if it's an important match coming up. People spend hours on timings. People spend hours on like figuring out where they need to, if they stand here and they aim to the left of this tree, like right above the branch, where do my GLs go? You know, can I tune that so that way I can hit the enemy when they're just getting out of their cars? Um, if there's a marginally better place to go, and this is if you're in a team that like doesn't give a fuck about you or has like a bunch of drama all the time or something, uh, people don't typically avoid that jump. If if they see an opportunity to kind of go for something better, and it's obvious that like the leadership don't give a fuck about anyone else's insights or opinions or like the trajectory of where things are going, people are just gonna go. It's kind of like with a job interview. Typically, the job that you're interviewing for that's offering like a bonus or something like that, they're offering a bonus because the turnover rate is high, or because people really don't want to do that job. So you just got to have a little bit of insight and think about it a little bit. And it'll be obvious, usually like a week and a half, 2 weeks in advance, that things are kind of ending. If no one's posted in your Discord for like 2.5 weeks, look for another team. You know what I'm saying? Like, it doesn't happen with anyone. Leadership should be saying something, saying good morning, how's everyone doing? Um, it'll be very obvious if your team is about to be no longer. Um, Next subject. Uh, we're kind of keeping in tone with the slightly negative commentary about competitive culture. Uh, Natural competitive culture decline. Um, we're all people, and you know, to a degree, everything's kind of downstream of working relationships and work culture. In the military, you have a joke: the good people leave, and the bad people they just find a way to stay, don't they? And it's always all the staff sergeants and sergeant first classes in the army are all the people that you ask them like, you know, are you gonna stay in until retirement? And they go, I'm halfway, I guess. Like, I don't really know. It's whatever. You never seem to talk to anyone that's like, yeah, I fucking love this experience. This is me. This is me. Same thing with competitive, right? You will often find when you look at your team from, you know, June this year to June next year, 10 people left, and they were all kind of like the people you wanted to be around. Um, Charisma, experience, and buy-in. Just stay with me here philosophically. Tends to correlate with having opportunities, you know? Uh, if a game gets boring, or if life kind of gets in the way, people have kids and stuff, those people tend to shift and just go where they're needed. Again, kids, job changes, family, etc. And you'll find that the shitty people tend to have less going on. So there's just fewer opportunities for those people to cycle out. They're fine with the status quo. They don't give a fuck that they're not liked. You should probably care if 90% of the people on the team don't like you. Just pointing that out. We're playing a flawed game. There's a ton of quality of life problems with the inherent game. So much so that, you know, go to the server browser. 95% of the servers with population are modded, and they mod away from the vanilla game experience. Um, so we're playing something that's kind of not balanced or good to begin with. And just to bring it back again, within that flawed experience, you're talking about an even more niche community that's inherently time intensive, right? You got to do matches and scrimmages and trainings and on weekends and your free time. Um, so that's just over time, regardless of what anyone wants to do, there is cultural decline. It's just up to us to slow that as much as possible. Um, and there's a component of it in, you know, in a culture or a community where we're measuring skill and wins, stuff like that. Uh, there's a natural tendency to just see skill, only see skill, and none of the other bits that kind of matter or should matter. Uh, Professionalism, the ability to work well with other people, you know, those bits, uh, that often feeds really into talent mismanagement, I would call it, and kind of misvaluing players. Because you're going to find that people who are great at anything or everything but shooting, they'll always get pushed to the side in favor of the shooters, right? There's two main things that happen in this game: you shoot at people and you get shot at. Um, which kind of just leaves you full of a discord of people if you don't try to account for that stuff and value those other personalities and roles. Uh, with a bunch of people that are good at shooting the game, but they don't want to play with each other, right? Again, if no one's posted anything in your Discord for 2 weeks, go to greener pastures. I'd seen the big thing in Squad. I've mentioned it a couple of times is kind of superstar coalitions where none of the people in the coalition are necessarily even in the same organic teams. They only get together. They literally all they do. They have a Discord that sits empty for 3 months out of the year at a time, and then the next tournament comes up, and then they'll all pile into that Discord for whatever the specific training is, or like the meeting of, hey, this is how we're going to play this situation, and the map's going to be this, and X, Y, and Z. And then they only go into that Discord voice channel for when the match time is. And then as soon as the match is over, they fucking hop out of that Discord. None of them ever talk to each other ever again. Um, so, does that sound good? Does that sound fun? No, shouldn't. Hopefully. Now, hard cut to just kind of a really different portion of the video. We're just talking about competitive culture and sort of the competitive scene and what kind of occurs naturally, what people are incentivized to do. And this is going to be the portion of the game of the video where I'm less talking to people in leadership roles that have probably been doing this for a little bit, and probably not even to people that have been in a ton of scrimmages. I'm more talking from this section on to people that this is their first thing. Yeah, they just put together a team of 10 people for the 10v10s in the bracket, right? There are 6 kind of primary roles for a game like this that you're going to find people doing or wanting to do in a competitive setting. Some of them are a little bit, I dare to say, less legitimate than others. Hold on, squeaky chair. But I should probably get a new chair at some point. You've got people who are primarily shooters. You can have different combinations of these things. I'm not saying in any way, shape, or form that you can only have singular focuses, but you'll tend to find that people can put a lot of energy into one thing and then a little bit of energy into other things. So you'll have shooters, people that care about getting cool scoreboards and like good KD ratios, And these people are kind of driven primarily um, by you feeling good. You know, if you kill three people in a situation in like a 3v1 uh, that you weren't supposed to win in any way, shape, or form, oh yeah, feels like the best high at that time. As far as fun that you can have in a game, especially in a competitive context where you're going against people that like, or at the very least, communicating better than people are in public matches. Ooh, it feels good to crush like an offensive move if you're doing defense. Ooh yeah. Um, you've got healers, or kind of gear carrying. You know, this game doesn't really treat its medical system well in a vanilla context, at the very least. You know, it's rare for sure in a competitive context. Just get it. I get it. If you're playing public matches, you've probably got tons of experiences where someone hits you unconscious and they don't follow up and you're able to get up again. That is not going to happen in a competitive context. If you weren't ready for that, you should probably start building that into kind of like your mentality now. So having the concept that people are going to play like combat medics, that only works if people don't immediately die when they get shot at, right? That insinuates that you're going to like bring someone back from being unconscious. Not gonna happen. But there's there's something to say about having someone that's focused on that shit. So like at the beginning of the match, you know, you've got everyone kind of runs over to the arsenal bunker once it's built, or you know, you respawn an objective and you got to tweak your loadout a little bit. You know, people can be worried about sort of like the gunplay aspect and the gunfighting aspect of their loadout builds, and then you can have a guy that's designated as the combat medic, I guess, that goes over to the first aid tent and he grabs all the shit. So that way, when everyone loads up into a vehicle or something like that, that guy, you know, you can kind of save time. That guy can dump all the extra morphine in there. People can grab what they need. And it's effectively just that guy's still, you know, an infantry guy, but he's kind of the designated person in certain situations to kind of carry about the healing items. Um, Gear carrying in general is sort of what I would argue is going to be more common in this, and you can kind of mix those two. So I set them as sort of the same role description. Um, Gear carry people, you know, whether it's medical supplies or extra ammunition or something like that, you know, depends on sort of the limitations that are kind of set with either season 2 or season 3. But you might get into a situation where like you actually do need someone to carry the extra saw ammo for the guy that's rocking the saw or something. Extra rockets, all that good jazz. Maybe like an extra radio backpack for the squad lead or whatever the fuck, right? Um, and then I'll kind of go specifically for those two. I've got descriptions for kind in the next section for all of these things, but for those two specifically, I'll kind of go into the nuances and the incentive structure for those two roles specifically. Then you've got drivers, logistics. So if you kind of notice, we're just addressing core aspects of the game. What do? You shoot at people, you get shot at, you drive vehicles. Um, Drivers and logistics people. Uh, these are people, at the very least in public matches, you'll see them all the time. People that aren't necessarily good at gunplay, but they want to benefit the team. So they would like to use their time and their patience and their ability within the confines of like their computer hardware or whatever, or what, you know, they're playing on a TV and not a monitor or whatever the fuck. Um, you know, these are the people that kind of outline themselves to do the stuff that no one else wants to do. Um, then you've got kind of leaders and shot callers. I separate the two. Leaders tends to be more of a discord and learning structure, and shot callers are like the people in game that actually make competent spur of the moment decisions. Those two are not necessarily linked. Some people will know exactly what I'm talking about. And then you've got trainers, kind of media people. These are people that like maybe they burned out on the game, um, but they still kind of want to benefit the team or the community, and they've got some insight to share, right? I would argue that I'm a trainer or a media person as opposed to like I'm my days of being on a team or having a team are kind of past me. The satisfaction isn't quite there as it used to be, so I'm chasing something else. Yeah, having people that can go through training, like I touched on before. It's really kind of hard to get it into your mind that like not only should we have scrimmages, but we should also have like real deal practices where we rotate between like different aspects. For 15 minutes, guys are going to work on 5v5 fighting in this one particular area of the map, and then once that 15 minutes is up, those guys are all going to respawn, and they're going to respawn over to this area on the map where the focus is something else, where it's like you know anti-tank practice hitting stuff at range or whatever the fuck. And then you rotate to the next thing, whatever. People that run that training, and sort of like the Discord side of when things are happening. I'd argue that like trainers too can be people that set up scrimmages against other teams. Because a lot of times you'll have to have a close connection to your team's ability and what you guys need to focus on from a training perspective when you go to set up that negotiation. So, like, I'm not going to try and set up a scrimmage with a top tier team that's like number 3 in the world uh, if we can't even do basic gunplay. And then media people, yeah, I'm trying to do my part for this. Hopefully, I can spur other people and inspire other people. God knows I'm not actually inspiring, but maybe my inability to do it will spur someone to do it better. Um, each team should kind of aspire to have like a clips guy at the very least, like someone or a couple of people that go through and play in a match that can record something cool and then clip it up and post it up. That's a great advertising tool for your team as well, because other people aren't really going to be doing that. So if you're like one of the 3 teams that has a guy that's doing that, that's an incredible tool. And then you've got culture people as my kind of last role. Culture people and charisma people. These are people that might be a shooter or a healer or a driver or a leader or a trainer or media person or something like that. But there are just naturally occurring. They're like unicorns. When you see one, you almost want to like trap it and study it for science. They're really rare. There are people that just have obscene charisma. People see that person or those people online in a voice channel, and suddenly that voice channel goes from like having 1 or 2 people to like 19 people because people just want to be around those guys. They tell good stories. They've got good info to share about the game or whatever it is. Those people should be some of the most valuable people in the community. And if there's an opportunity for those people to kind of mesh with the media people, ooh, got something good there. That's not something the squad ever had. Um, yeah, I'll go into that, but um, so this section kind of breaks down each of those roles as I've kind of laid them out and kind of who falls into those roles. This section is specifically if you find yourself in one of these roles, here's kind of how you evaluate where you're at and what you can do to improve. Because if you're kind of new to this space, or you're new to the concept of like competitive is inherently setting yourself with people you probably wouldn't organically meet in game. If you're kind of new to this concept and you're already bringing to the table like really good mouse play or really good gunplay as a shooter, for instance, you could often find yourself thinking, yeah, how do I kind of feel like I'm plateauing, or I'm kind of burning out, what's my next step to challenge myself? And this is kind of the section that I would like to dedicate to offering what my position is on that. So for shooters specifically, first of all, if you've decided that you're going to try and be like your team's top fragger, you have a very harsh and hard road ahead. Probably harder than anyone else. There are roles that have equal or more value to you, but as far as what you have to force yourself to do to get to that level, good fucking luck. Um, if you're struggling, uh, reach out to me. I don't know. Maybe I can offer some better specific advice. But playing ordinary public matches isn't going to help you past a certain point. So this is going to get really confusing for just a second for this specific role, but if people are kind of in this space, they're going to understand kind of what I'm talking about. There's, if you would like to put, you know, dog shit at the game and the best that you can technically ever perform, you're high on cocaine and you're just on one. You're hitting all your fucking shots. Your reaction times are fantastic. Your map knowledge is obscene. You know exactly what's going to be on the other side of that rock. Um, there is sort of a spectrum from 0 to 100% of what you can perform in the game, right? So, in that regard, 0 to 30% of that ability comes from putting yourself in harsh situations in an ordinary match, but you will never get past 30% of your ability just doing that. Okay. You're just never gonna. I'm talking about like most of the times when you're talking about reaction times being important, you're talking about up close and immediate gunplay, right? You're not talking about seeing some movement in a tree line 300 meters away, 400 meters away, and trying to hit a shot, right? You're talking about like you rounded the command tent, there's 5 people right there. You got to get all headshots if you're going to have any chance of like staying on the objective. Um, you're not going to get past 30%. Okay. Going from 30 to roughly 60% or a little higher is only going to come from playing against curated skill and experience. Scrimmages, if you're able to manage, if your team gives a fuck enough, um, setting up, or if you give a fuck enough, setting up little 5v5 events and stuff. Where you can kind of, it's not about like a larger battle or cutting off the enemy or whatever the fuck it is, only about like, hey, we're only fighting in Montanak, for instance. Lots of corners, lots of alleyways, lots of space to kind of manage, fences that people can shoot through and stuff. Your sound kind of management has to be on point. Um, it's only going to happen there. Being a good shooter is easy, but being a great shooter, consistency is key here. Being a great shooter requires the most repetition and practice out of any role on the team by like exponential levels. Along with a lot, this is going to sound goofy, a lot of self honing and kind of soul searching. Okay. Um, this is going to be the most egotistical that I've ever sounded ever. And by no means, when I was doing competitive for squad, at my highest high, the reality is I was maybe top 50, like as a fragger or a shooter in the game. Maybe. Probably 49 of the other top fraggers were Europeans, and I never met them. Um, but yeah, just take me at my word here. Just it's not relevant whether I actually was or kind of wasn't. But at my best as a fragger, back when I thought that that was like everything, before I did any squad lead stuff or focused on like map control, the community aspect, or anything, I thought that this was the central aesthetic, the only thing that mattered in the game. And I put, at the time between Korea and then when I got moved to Fort Drum, I was spending 8 hours a day minimum with the game, just running matches over and over and over and over and over and over. And then doing competitive scrimmages and murking for other teams that I had no business like being in their scrimmage or in their practice and all that stuff. Um, the difference between me performing at like 60%, 70% of my ability and like 90%, 95% of my ability was stuff like, what is my chair position? Do I have a new mouse pad or do I need to replace it? What's the temperature in the room? I would run my AC at the time at max. My room would be 56 degrees. Um, no, I think like 48 or 49. And I would wear a sweatshirt. Uh, like having kind of cold air to breathe in, but like a warm core temperature was where it was at for me. My hands would be cold, my wrist would be cold, but then like my arm past my wrist would kind of be warm. I had to sit in like a really specific way. I had to rebind all of my key binds so that way it kind of God, what's the word? Not enhanced, drove me. I can't think of the right word, but drove me to sit in a specific way. I would have to kind of like tweak my arm a little bit, which meant that my my mouse hand would sit on my desk right. Uh, you're talking about like, how long ago did you eat? Do you feel full? Did you just have an energy drink? Did you listen to like pre-hype or pre-match hype music? um, you know, was it actually good songs, or did you are you kind of disgruntled that Spotify fucked you over? Um, really, really facetious, like really micro, all that stuff could throw me off, right? Um, you're not going to kind of get to that level if you think that that's important. Uh, if you're at that stage, then you're there. If you're not at that stage, then you're not there. And kind of like I said, if you're not at that stage and you would like to get there, I would argue that it's not the way to go and it's not what's important to the game. But if you want to do you, cool. Um, Set yourself up consistently with situations where you shouldn't win, right? Um, in public matches, play with pistols only, no body armor, no helmets, nothing. Like, and if you want to take it further, 3 magazines. You should be alternating between Soviet side and U.S. side. Give yourself a magazine in the gun, and that's it. And you gotta make it last as long as possible on an objective. Um, you have to you have to set yourself up in absolutely like what the fuck are you doing situations to really eke out like, because if you don't have to hit a shot in tenths of a second, then you won't. You'll just never you'll never push yourself to that level. Um, it's part of why I like, even though I don't really care about that aspect anymore. I can't play games with high time to kill. If I had to put 15 rounds into someone like in the Division, I think that was the last like real single player game that I tried to do for a shooter. Can't fucking do it. Anyways, moving on. Everyone else, uh, healer and kind of gear carry roles are great in the game for people that kind of want to be right there in the action, but they aren't able to perform consistently well as a shooter. Typically, the gear, your ability to maintain and carry gear and not have it disappear on the ground means that you have to live and kind of everyone else dies. So these people work really well as kind of rally and radio backpack buddies. These are people that can carry an extra radio, so that way you can have a refreshed kind of wave of spawns, because they're going to kind of sit back and not push right into the objective. Um, these people are always really great with playing as a conservative kind of hold this area people. You set them in a bush and they'll kill anything that walks into the tree line, but they're not so good or consistent that they can like push into the town and make trades. Which no shame, no shame at all. That's an incredibly legitimate way to play the game, especially since you can completely submerge yourself in bushes in this game, which bothers me. But um, for these people, if you're trying to get better in this role, map knowledge and being able to kind of read a situation and hear what's going on around you are typically where you're looking to improve. Um, You're not making squad lead decisions for the squad lead, but you're moving to places before he even asks it. So, if, and this is especially relevant when it comes to like rally or backpack play. Um, when uh, because in the vanilla game, it's not the squad lead that has to put down the radio. It's anyone in the squad to put down the radio, right? So you need to know based on where you're fighting at. Hey, we've already tried and we've about used up this radio backpack that we've already got for this particular angle. I'm already rotating around um, to another place to set the next one down. Um, you shouldn't need the squad lead to kind of tell you to do that. If anything, the squad lead and you should just kind of like walk together and just kind of do it. For drivers and logistic play, it really kind of depends. You know, ARCL is set up to be AAS centric, so there's only going to be like a linear line of objectives. So if your team is using a strategy, or your squad is using a strategy that really relies on supply at key moments, think like we need to be able to spawn this helicopter as soon as possible. We've got armor pushing this side of the map, but if they die, they need to immediately be able to just respawn. Um, yeah, emergency wave spawning on a defense point, for instance, or at like an obscure base that you kind of wouldn't expect. Um, and if you're in this kind of role, getting better at your role is all about creativity, logic, and courage with driving, testing alternate routes, timings, helping with timings, so that way you can help the leadership for your team uh, figure out sort of the beginning stages of strategy and planning for a match. And then general speed, right? Um, what are you doing? Okay, we're gonna play on this map, right? I'm gonna reference Gogland a little bit from season one's recordings and stuff, right? Um, we know that our defense point is going to be here. We know that we get here well ahead of the enemy, but we're going to have most of our people not stay at this um, our defensive objective. We're really going to push offense super, super hard. So that really kind of opens us up to the risk of a saboteur in our backlines because no one's going to kind of be back here to do anything about it or help me. Um, so I'm going to go through and I'm going to find 3 or 4 alternate routes. And 3 of them might be just driving through the woods and not flipping. There's like not even a road. It's, do you care enough about your role to like, hey, all right, I took the ordinary road and I didn't get blown up that time. I'm going to alternate my route anyways when I come back. Just kind of building that almost. What is wrong with me? God, it's getting late, I guess. Superstition. It starts with a P, whatever. Someone's going to yell at me. Paranoia. There we go. That's kind of where you're going to look to increase. Suggest like crazy off the wall stuff. As far as like alternate routes, by the way, you might get shut down, but at the end of the day, none of the people that are going to shut you down are going to drive those fucking routes, right? So a lot of times, if you have an idea for something, just as someone that has done that and been in that position before, just record yourself doing it on like a locally hosted server and show that you can consistently hit it. And people will typically kind of melt away from that. Leadership. Okay. I touched on it earlier, where there's a difference, there's a very fine line between leaders and shot callers. Leadership, it's really interesting, and I actually just had a conversation with someone where we kind of pointed out that like the culture is inherently different with console players being available from squad to reforger, where it's funny because in squad and like Arma 3 for instance, PvE milsim never dipped a toe into like PvP events. Typically PvE players and PvP players hate each other. They don't want anything to do with each other. PvE people call PvPers sweat and or sweaty, and PvP players call PvE people fucking cringe role players. Um, which is funny, even in that case, because so much of competitive leadership, like structure and ranks, if you will, or whatever the fuck, um, share the exact same, probably imported problems from PvE kind of milsim leadership. Uh, Being in a position of power does not mean that you know how to exercise it half competently. Um, you will, it's inevitable, especially for North American competitive teams. You're going to notice a very real um, dislike and refusal to explain strategy from your leadership. Prove me wrong. Fucking prove me wrong, pussy. I didn't need to say that, but you'll ask why you're doing something, and people just won't give you an explanation, typically, just because this is the thing to do. Or you'll get, this is the meta. Can your team even sustain the meta? Are you even that fucking good? Like, eh. um, shot calling, you'll notice, it's typically not the people in leadership roles, especially for a particular match, especially in a tournament. Shot calling tends to come from the guy that's good enough to stay alive, right? Shot calling is the guy that really is watching the map and going like, "Hey, don't even run it in." Right? I'm gonna give a situation that should kind of mesh well with everyone in everyone's minds. You're going to attack an objective, right? You set down a radio backpack in an alternate angle. You run into the objective, everyone dies. Everyone respawns on the radio backpack. Everyone goes in again, everyone dies. Respawn on the radio backpack, maybe go to replace the radio backpack because it's all live spaced now as opposed to supply. Go to respawn on the radio backpack. The shot caller is the guy that's not retarded enough to go, nah, it's third time's the charm. The shot caller is the guy that's like, dude, this isn't working. And you'll often find that the shot caller isn't listened to. But the shot caller is just whoever at the, it's expectation versus reality, if you want to think about it. That's the delineation that I make. Like it's the hey, this is going to be the plan, and then the person that's actually capable of like altering the plan and making a good logical, hey, we need to not come in from the east side this time. We need to come in from the west. Um, so if you are in a shot caller position, or if you are in a leadership position and you've gotten the complaint a couple of times that you fucking suck, how you get better at your role, both, while not being equal, is just really map knowledge and then like aggregating information. Yeah. If you're on a team, you're listening to this, and this is your first tournament, okay? Don't base what you're doing purely on what other teams have done. You need to build your own culture and your own ability. You need to aggregate your own information and data. All that stuff fluctuates. You know, the meta, if you're attacking this one objective that all the top teams, they've already had their matches, so you can watch the recordings. The meta for them could be to push in from the north side. That's not necessarily the meta for you, because they could have 15 phenomenal top tier shooters to substantiate that push, and you just don't. You need to have like your own introspection. You need to build your own, well, when we've done this in the past, this hasn't worked out. So we actually have to play a little conservative and work this area in a different way, which kind of sucks because it means that it's going to take you a bunch of scrimmages and maybe a tournament gone by that you kind of didn't place well in or something like that. Your experience, if you kind of do it right, and don't just try to copy what other people are doing, you're going to feel such great satisfaction when you look back 2 years from now and you're like, God, we used to be terrible. Remember that? And you're just not going to have that if all you do is just copy what everyone else does. And part of that introspection, if you're a shot caller, or I suppose, hold on a second. Sorry about that. Not an audio issue. Something in real life. If you're in a leadership position and you're not shit at kind of understanding your people and understanding like what your localized strategy needs to be and what you can support, you've got your finger on the pulse. There are 6 other people on your team that are in a leadership position that do suck. So just know, but like you've got a little bit to overcome, statistically speaking. Um, but there's hope. And kind of like I had said a couple of sections earlier, if you find yourself on a team and you're not being valued, so if you're the one guy in a leadership role on your team and like no one else gives a damn, maybe it's not for you. I would say something and see if something changes. But the reality is that you'll just get booted from your leadership position and probably from the team. Especially if you're on a North American team. Trainers, media roles. The only thing I really have to say for this is all pretty logical, right? Some of the most underrated roles, underappreciated jobs in the community. Training can range from like people that are able to consistently just articulate information to like literal psych roles and positions. That's a reference to Counter Strike, where there's multi-million-dollar prize pools and stuff. But there is incredible value with having someone in the community or on the team that doesn't even necessarily like play, but they're good at communicating and they're good at understanding people and articulating information and getting, sensing when there's kind of a misunderstanding. Not to toot my own fucking horn, but so many times we would have like, hey, 2 weeks lead up and then this tournament's going to start. We know that our first match is going to be Fool's Road. And this is going to be the layout for the map. I would explain to the guys that were in my squad, hey, this is the area that we're kind of being charged with controlling. These are kind of the concerns that I have. Hey, this Wednesday, and a lot of times too, I would go through and record like a fucking video showing my perspective. And then, hey, this Wednesday, if everyone's got the time just for like 30 minutes, we're all going to load into the training server. We're going to pop open that map. We're going to practice what our drive is going to be, so that way everyone can kind of see it and experience it. We're going to drop off where we're actually going to drop off in the game, and we're just going to kind of walk around together and talk about things. You get to that like walk around and talk about phase, and you realize or you find out like every single person in the squad didn't give a fuck until that moment. Um, so like just being able to sense and engage with people and know like, man, no one watched that fucking YouTube video, but this is really important. So like we should make sure that we do this. Huge. If you're shooting for one of those jobs though, specifically a trainer's job, just know that you're going to be really underappreciated and not paid or compensated in any way, shape, or form. Media content, just again, kind of made a note about it. It could just be clips content, guys. It doesn't have to be anything fancy like I'm doing. This isn't even fancy. Just you can do comedy content like Squidders does for Squad, right? You just take a short video, like clip collection from your week of playing public matches, and then you post it up in the Discord. So like people have something funny to watch. You can watch vehicles like fly off into the stratosphere and stuff. And then the last point that I would give, again, or obviously, is like culture and charisma. That often dovetails into people that are willing to do media content, right? If someone's just inherently funny, they're going to find a way into that role. people that are well liked, again, are just the best currency. In a way that like nothing else is really gonna be that fantastic. I touched on it earlier, but the biggest concern that teams end up with and the biggest friction point is getting people to sign up for events, right? If you have someone with fantastic charisma that people want to play with, those signups are really easy to get. And when you don't have those people that are playing in those events and people don't want to play, you notice the absence. Um, People that are able to really sense when burnout's pretty high, or people don't really want to spend a whole lot of time with the game, or people are having a rough day. You're just playing public matches and like someone got laid off or something like that. People that are able to kind of repair that damage and get those people to bounce back are huge. That very long section aside, we're almost to the end here. This is going to be one of the longer episodes. Um, I think it's important to kind of I'd mentioned it earlier, but in I think episode 6 or something like that. What's the ideal mentality or the goal set when you're going into this thing? Um, Regardless of whether you're a team that's played in a bunch of tournaments and a bunch of scrimmages, or if this is your first kind of event, what's your goal? Is it just winning? Um, if I'm gonna pick on North American culture again, if you're a North American team, I highly recommend picking a different goal from just winning. Um, Make it about the process, getting better as a team, playing with like-minded people, translating your enjoyment of the game to other people. I That's what I used to do in squad and kind of my later stages of time with the game. I would play public matches, and I really kind of wouldn't run around and shoot people. Not really. Like I would just play as a squad lead. I would articulate what was going on, and I would try to give people like a good experience that were probably new to the game and stuff. I'd try to set up my spawns that were like right on the objective, so that way people didn't have to get lost in the sauce or get killed on the way pushing in. And um, if you set a really shallow kind of uh, not random, but like not consequential. I can't think of the right word again. Shallow, like winning the tournament. You're kind of setting yourself up for failure because then if you don't win 3 tournaments in a row, what the fuck are people looking forward to doing? Um, if you're a North American team, I guarantee you will just spend most of the tournament getting your teeth kicked in by a Euro team. The culture and the player base is just so much better. And I'm not saying that that's like a reason to not participate in the tournament, but I'm just saying like if you only care about winning, I've talked to a couple of Euro teams so far. They just talk about the game differently, man. You've got an uphill battle. And then just kind of a last note, kind of dovetails into that about like kind of Euro UK culture versus North American culture. Um, if you're in an NA team, uh, or you are a player that's looking to start out in competitive, maybe you've got like a small group of guys, 3, 4 people, and you're like, 10 people isn't far off. Um, you should involve yourself with UK and EU players when possible. North American competitive culture, there's something about American culture itself, and then also probably directly downstream from that, gaming culture in North America that is inherently toxic. So anytime that you can fit in an interaction with like a British person, you should see that as like a vaccine. Like, all right, I've got a little bit of time before I become a complete piece of shit, before I succumb. UK players, you need to see yourself as a diamond. You are and should be highly sought after. you're in the perfect time zone to play with both North American teams and European teams. You're typically, I suppose you could just have a guy that's a one in a million dick, technically. You're typically not toxic. You have typically a lot of time to play the game, which is not a comment about the UK's social safety net in any way, shape, or form. But moving on. And again, you can play for North American EU time zones. So with all those pieces to the puzzle, you should at the very least have more opportunities to be better at the game because you can play with people that are 3 time zones away in either direction. So you can play with European people before they go to bed, and then you can play with people on the East Coast of the U.S. So just a thing that I would like to interject there. And we have made it to the end of the episode. A little bit of a longer one for this, but like I said, kind of in the beginning, talking about the boring stuff is sometimes pretty important. Can't all be flashy and controversial. Um, Again, just sort of like ending advertisements. If you represent a team or a competitive community where you feel that you'd be a good candidate for an interview, specifically if you are participating in ARCL Season 2, you can join our Discord through the link in the description and reach out just to get the idea with those interviews is kind of hey, we're Team Nautilus and we're, based in Germany, but we play a lot with kind of European and UK people in general. And this is what we really care about. And we feel that we're bringing, this to the table. We do a really great job of managing mortars and helicopters and infantry play in a really engaging way. That's kind of the intent for those interviews. The idea is that they're kind of like 20-30 minute videos at most. So that way everyone, not only should it serve as an automatic advertisement for groups, but it should kind of build clout and culture so that way we can then go through and support that while ARCL Season 2 is going along, little check-ins and seeing how everyone's feeling. And then post-season content is going to be huge. Talking to people about, like, what was your strategy for this match? And then going over recordings and going like, well, how are you kind of feeling here? And then I saw that you kind of did this. And what was your kind of thought process with that and stuff like that? So that's kind of what's on offer there. If you made it to the end of the video, thank you. I saw when I went to like my little YouTube creation, the studio section, I saw that the ARCL interview got 55 views. The Camo Net Podcast episode 6 got 21. Fucking crazy. I don't give a damn about how many views there are. Like, for instance, episode 7 only has 11. I'm used to like 2-3 views per video, brother. 55, though, is incredible. So thank you for all the people that kind of went through and watched that. That's absolutely adds to my drive to go through and interview individual teams and check in with the staff and stuff like that. I see that view count and I see 55 other people that are really excited to kind of step into this realm and turn this into a hobby. And the interest is only going to kind of grow from here. So thank you for kind of being with me and driving the competitive culture in a positive direction. I say it anytime that kind of anyone reaches out to me through DMs, but like this whole culture aspect just didn't happen in squad. So it really makes me feel like I'm doing something good and valiant by kind of learning from those lessons and then fixing them effectively for a better experience. But anyways, thanks for sticking with me. See you in the next episode. The next video that should come out actually is an interview. But